Welcome to another edition of our SketchUp Workshop series for Term 1 2019. So it's a big welcome as well to anyone watching the recordings of these sessions, where I know a lot of people will be tuning in. And Belinda, welcome to you just joining. We've literally just gotten started, so great to have you here. As I was explaining before the session started as well, before the recording, feel free to ask any questions as we go along and ask for me to cover any particular skills that you like once we get going. I've got a few things which I want to cover to address some other student requests as well, but your contributions and questions are very important, so put them in as we go. So the workshop format for today, we'll briefly cover the SketchUp interface just so that anyone who hasn't seen these before can be up to speed with toolbars. Recap on some basic skills and concepts, but for most of you now you'll have some skills already, so you won't need too long on that. And today we're going to focus on groups and layers. They're the two main ways that we organise our geometry, both physically and visually. And then we're going to look at saving some scenes within our model and modifying styles as well. That gives us more control over our visual output in our SketchUp work. So any questions and problem solving as we go along, type them into the chat section and we'll see if we can't address those on the hop. Now, I like to remind people every week of some of the very good free and interactive resources that are on the SketchUp website as well. So these two links here, and you can literally just go to the SketchUp website, which is sketchup.com, and find your way to these links as well. But the learn.sketchup.com link and their blog as well, which is at blog.sketchup.com. That's where you go to solve problems. There's users from all around the world. You can share a screenshot and a comment or two on anything you get stuck on in SketchUp, even if it's a really complex issue, the software not doing what you think it should be. That's where I go to solve complex problems in SketchUp. The whole worldwide user community there, ready to answer questions and help with things. And welcome to Leanne, great to have you here. We've only been going for a few minutes, so I have SketchUp up and running, ready to roll. We're going to do some practical exercises in just a minute. Right, so a reminder that in SketchUp, as with many other CAD and graphics applications, it is very beneficial to have the 3-button mouse, because built into the mouse wheel is a lot of other functionality, such as if you scroll in and out, that will zoom in and out, and wherever you hold your cursor will be the focal point of that zoom as well. And to click down and hold on the mouse wheel and drag instigates the orbit tool, as does a simple pressing of O on the keyboard as a shortcut. And then when you're clicking and holding your mouse wheel down and you hold your shift key at the same time, it will bring up the hand or the pan tool to go from side to side without actually spinning in an orbit. And you can double click on the mouse wheel to recenter your view. It'll recenter around just all of the geometry on the screen so far, which is the same as the zoom extents button on your keyboard, but a quicker way to do that. All right, just a reminder as well, with templates, when you're opening SketchUp, you'll get a welcome screen, and it often defaults to the Learn tab there, but you can click on Template and choose a template. I like the Architectural Design millimeters template, but anything with millimeters as the units, that's a key thing, and we'll check our units on as we go along today as well. Because it's American software, if you've got feet and inches as your units, you'll be drawing things that might be too large or a different size to what you have intended. And just to make sure everyone's looking at the same set of tools. Belinda, I don't think you were here last week, but you may have been already, hopefully you've already seen some of the recordings from or live sessions from the design drawing classes. So I think everyone's probably pretty familiar with the types of toolbars that we use, but I'll go over this very quickly. And if you guys can just type in whether you're on Mac or PC as well, so I know who's using what platform. There are minor differences in SketchUp, but they are very minor, which is good. There's nothing too complicated in there. So we always want to see our large tool set. So on a Mac, that's under the View menu and Tool Palettes and Large Tool Set. And under the View menu as well, View menu, Camera menu, and the Window menu are the three that you should use the most in in SketchUp, and welcome Shirley as well, and Belinda. Yes, they are recorded. We're sharing MP4 recordings of these sessions in various classes, and I think through the student hub as well. Same place that you'll see the general announcements about the SketchUp workshops taking place. So there's MP4 versions where you won't necessarily see the chat section, but you'll be able to see the video screen, and you can pause and play back, and you can keep those for a future resource. Shirley as well, just joining us, just let me know if you're on Mac or PC. We're just going through setting up toolbars. I want everyone to have SketchUp open and have the same or very similar set of tools on their screen. So for Mac users, it's View, Tool Palettes, and Large Toolset. And then with the View menu, again, you can click on Customize Toolbar if you're a Mac user. Or you can always right-click in the empty area of your top toolbar, bringing up the drag and drop window. This is only for Mac. The Windows is a bit more menu-based. And we just always drag, if you haven't got them already. The row of houses there, which is the standard views, they're very handy. We're going to be using that a bit today, actually, that one there. So make sure you've got your standard views, the little row of houses showing. I normally put it sort of somewhere in the top right. I drag the undo and redo button if I'm using a Mac, somewhere in the middle there or top left. And then the layers pull down menu as well goes up the top of your screen, because we do use layers quite a bit, as you will in Photoshop and other programs as well. And we always show some other dialog boxes and tray items on the right of our screen. So if you're on a Mac, they're under the window menu, and we normally show, we normally tick materials, styles, layers, and seams, pretty much all of which we're going to use today, actually. We can bring them up at any time, and you can expand and collapse on them, by clicking on the top little bar there. They'll be free-floating windows on a Mac, and then on PC they'll sort of all stack in a row automatically, but just stack them yourself on the right if you're a Mac user. So they're all under the window menu. And on a PC it's window and default tray, and then you tick those things. It's a slightly different location, all under the window menu, but on a PC, like I said, it's under window and then default tray, materials, styles, layers, and seams. You can hide or show the tray as well, so if you can't see it, if you're on a PC, it can be shown or hidden. And in time, like I was saying, we just stack them on the right there. And while we're on it for PC, View menu and Toolbars, click on that. It'll bring up the Toolbars window, and you just tick the following ones. The Large Toolset, which is this one here, you place that on the left. The Layers, that's the pull-down menu for layers. I untick the Getting Started toolbar as well if I'm on a PC, because it just doubles up a few buttons if you leave it there. The standard toolbar will have undo, redo, print, and such on it. And then what's called standard views on a Mac is the views on a PC, which is the row of houses, and I just drag them up to the top right there somewhere. I normally put layers in the top middle. But as long as you can see those various items, you want them ticked under View menu and Toolbars on a PC. Large Toolset, Layers, Standard, and Views. So hopefully for everyone watching the recording as well, that's a quick rundown. You can pause and play back if you need to, because I'm going through this fairly quickly. I cover it at the start of each session, but I don't want to spend too long on it. Many of you will already have these in place. Just keep in mind as well that when you're using SketchUp or any other software, you can always change these things on the go. You can change your units, you can change the template, styles, toolbar locations as you go along. It is very flexible. So for both Windows and Mac, it's under the Window menu and Model Info that you will find units. This is really the place to go to look for the back end of your file, where you can modify where your files save. You can modify a few settings with dimensions. They're limited, but you can change text and arrowhead styles and that for your dimensions. You can also change your text fonts and things like that. But the last heading here is units. We just want to double check that we're using decimal and millimeters there. And precision, you can set that to multiple decimal points, but 0 is fine. And you can either tick or untick the display units format. It'll just show the mm or not after your dimensions. So as you do your own self-directed study and practice with SketchUp software, and any software really, go to lynda.com. There's amazing training series on here. The SketchUp Essentials training series for whichever version of SketchUp you're using, 2019, 18 or 17, whichever it is. And look, they don't change much, the versions. I think there's a couple of little changes to the visual display of 2019, I'm hearing. I haven't upgraded to that just yet. But those SketchUp Essentials training series are fantastic. They are absolutely top-notch. They're free. You have access to them, so use them. And of course, you access lynda.com via your student hub. And it's handy if you log into your portal and everything first, and then if you go to the student hub, with a single click, it should automatically log you into lynda.com. All right, so let's get started on SketchUp, have it all open up and running, and we'll do some practical exercises together on the software. Okay, so now hopefully should be able to see my SketchUp screen. Just put up a green tick if you can. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to come up, so it's loading slowly at the moment. Yeah, just put a big tick once it's there. You can see it popping up for a few people now. Okay, good work. Great. I'll also try to minimize the panning and orbiting, because I know, especially in the MP4 recordings, but also in the live sessions, there is always, just with application sharing, there is a bit of a lag with screen refresh and things like that. So especially if you're watching the recording, bear with it. I will try and keep the screen movement to a minimum, because having watched the recordings myself to see if I'm making any sense, I can see that lag, so we'll try and keep that fairly smooth. Okay. Now, what we'll do is start with the basic shape. I like to build a floor area to work on. I think for interior design, it makes sense to build a structure similar to what we would build in any project that we're working on. So we'll start this with the rectangle tool, and I'll get you to work along with me here. After we've built a few things, we're going to group them, and we're going to lab, and we're going to organize our file as we go along. So with your rectangle tool, if you click on that, start at the origin. The junction between the axes is a really good way to just start a project, because you know that that's at the 0 level in terms of height. So I'm going to click and release the mouse button, drag away in the direction that I want. I always exaggerate the size or the proportion of the shape that I'm creating there, so I can see in the bottom right of my screen, if you have a look down the bottom right corner, I can see which is going to need to be the long and the shorter of the two dimensions I'm going to type in. So I might make this 8 by 4 meters, for instance, today. 8,000, comma is the separator, 4,000, and enter. We're working in millimeters, of course, so all our numbers are high. It's 8,000 millimeters by 4,000, comma is the separator. So then we are going to, so we're drawing an 8 by 4 meter rectangle. Then we're going to use our main modeling tool, the push-pull tool, to push downwards. It makes sense to push downwards so that 0 is our finished floor level. That's normally our datum for any interior design or architecture project. So push down, give it some thickness. I'll give it 300 and enter. So build that box, 8 by 4 meters, 8,000, 4,000. Give it some thickness. The thickness is nominal, really, so just choose a thickness and then put up a green tick once your box is there. Essentially, that's our floor slab. So I just typed into the chat section there what the dimensions were. It was 8,000 by 4,000, and give it to 2, 3, or 400 in thickness. That's fine. For anyone watching the recording, you have the benefit of pausing if needed, if I'm going too quickly. I will work at a reasonable pace today for this one. I want to get into some intermediate territory with visual output and display, things like that. Belinda, I can see you're typing. Shirley, just let me know as well how you're going progress-wise. with the tools. When using the rectangle tool to create geometry, okay, Linda, you're just going to watch for now. That's okay. Yeah, if you downloaded the free trial of SketchUp Pro, that goes for 30 days, and then at that point, SketchUp Pro is a new version. It's about $71 something. On the SketchUp website, SketchUp Australia, even if you just Google SketchUp Australia, it'll take you to the Building Point website. They're the company which manages licensing. Send them an email. They're very friendly. They're very familiar with all of our students and our organisation, because we have so many students that get that license. So they will help you to get that sorted out. They're really prompt. They're really quite supportive, I found, with that. Okay. So next thing we're going to do is group that together. My workflow for SketchUp, having learned this from some very experienced SketchUp trainers, which I found on their website, is to build something, group it together so that nothing else sticks to it, and then you do that with any object that you create. Build it, group it, and then once I've done a couple, we'll sort them into layers. Okay, so grouping and layering is the way to organize your geometry, and we only do all of these things to create, actually in the end, less work rather than more. So the next thing we're going to do, there's a range of ways you can select things in SketchUp. A left swipe with the mouse button held down, so from right to left or from left to right, will have slightly different functionality in terms of what it selects. A good quick way to select a whole object is to triple click on your left button, and it'll select all the connected geometry that you've made so far. If I went ahead and built 5 or 6 things, then they'd all select at once. They'd stick to each other. So triple click, then right click. Your right click button is definitely your friend in SketchUp, and then make group. So do that and then put up a green tick. I know some of you are watching and some of you are actively working along, which is both fine. Good speedy work there, team. Right, next thing we're going to do, we looked in the last SketchUp workshop at a couple of different ways to build walls. I'm just using my selection arrow there to click on the human figure. This one's Stacy. I know they've just introduced some new characters in SketchUp to keep it fresh. When you're moving anything, think about your starting point. I always try and reference one of my surfaces as a starting point, and I'll be careful where I'm moving her there. So both the starting point and the end point there were on that face. So now I haven't accidentally moved her up into the air or down a little bit or back too far or something like that. Very, very easy to accidentally lift things in SketchUp when you think you're moving them from side to side. So when you're moving things, it's very important to think about your starting point and your end point. I always say that the starting point of the move command is more important than the end point. You really need to know where you're coming from without getting too philosophical there. Now, a couple of different ways we can create walls now. I'll show you 2 different ways, but maybe today we'll just, you can choose your method for this actually. So a couple of different ways. You can use the rectangle tool and just trace over your floor surface there. A good little tip here as well. Now we've got a box for our slab that's grouped together, and I've just created another rectangle on top of that, and you'll see that funny shimmer effect on the face. If you ever see that with your materials, it means you've got 2 surfaces that are on the same plane that are competing for real estate there. So when you've got that, you know that you need to end up deleting one of them, otherwise your materials won't display properly. So we can use the offset tool, even if you want to work along with this, for everyone who is working along, we can do these walls together. So just trace over the top of your grouped slab with a rectangle, and then use the offset tool. Sometimes you need to hover just inside the edges, I find, with the offset tool before it says on edge. And then, like most commands, I'm going to click and release on my mouse, move in the direction that I want. I can exaggerate that distance a bit, and maybe these are external walls, so maybe I'll just make them 200. Just typing in 200 and enter. Anytime the command is running in SketchUp, you don't need to click in the bottom right of your screen to start typing. Just start typing and it goes in the right place. So now you'll see here we've split that top rectangle, which is just sitting on top of our floor, into 2 separate regions. We've got that border region there, and we've got the inside region, which again is competing with our floor surface there. So I want you to just click on that central rectangle there and just delete it. Hopefully it didn't delete the group below. It should just be a flat surface that you've deleted there. So once you've drawn that, those sort of train ones around the edge, just put up a green tick as well, and I'll know that you're up to speed. Excellent, well done. Next thing is to push-pull up to a certain height. Try to use standard wall heights. They're normally 2400, 2700 or 3 meters in Australia, something like that, multiples of 300. So I'll just make this 2400 and enter. So push-pull up with your walls there and put up a tick once you've done that. Like I said with everything, we're going to group things together after we've built them. Now this is my workflow whether I'm building a whole house or a multi-story building or just a single room. Okay, so for those of you who are doing a subject where you've got a project where you want to build a room or a bigger building, this is the workflow I would use. Now obviously if your floor plan steps in and out, you just take longer, you set that floor plan out first. I always start with building the floor of the object. I don't start with the walls, I start with the floor and then place, think about building a real building. Whether it's a timber flooring system or a concrete slab or whatever it is, I'll build the floor first, then put the walls on top. So it's sort of a logical order to working. So next we're going to triple click on our walls, right click and group them. So group them together and then put up a green tick. And for anyone who is new to the software, the reason why we do this is because SketchUp has sticky geometry. So for some people watching the workshop recording who may not have used the software before, anything we build in SketchUp will stick to the previous object if it's not grouped together. So there we've got a box. Then if I build another box, I'm just going to reference that point so they sit near each other. You can, it's called inferencing. If you hover over a point and then just move away slowly, it'll give you an alignment there. So those two boxes are separate objects, so I'll give you some thickness. So if we don't group them together, what will happen, I'll triple click on the second one here, select my move tool, move it over here. Now, if I change my mind, and this can work for you, you can, if you're planning it, this can give you some very good effects, but you'll see that those two objects have become joined. It's called sticky geometry. It is a fundamental principle of the way SketchUp works. So that's why we group things together. Otherwise you'll have chairs that are stuck to your floor and you delete part of them, they leave holes in the floor, all sorts of funny things happen. So groups are the most important thing. First step in organizing your file. Also remember that all SketchUp geometry is hollow geometry. I just deleted that edge there. We can see inside that double box shape there. Don't panic if you ever accidentally delete an edge. Figure out which one it is. All faces, all surfaces depend on a group of coplanar edges to form that surface. So we can heal that by just redrawing in the edge which we accidentally deleted. So once you understand that, the geometry is hollow. Edges can be manipulated a lot in SketchUp as well. I can select that top edge there and I can actually move that. So you can manipulate your shapes. There are limits to this, and you'll see I'm getting some pretty funny folded geometry there. But edges can be moved. Points can be moved as well. Okay, so I'm going a bit freeform here with these shapes. But once you know that, you can actually have a lot of control over your modeling when you know that points or edges can be moved or manipulated in SketchUp, okay? So when it comes to doing more complex geometry, what you'll find is that when you understand the way the geometry works, you can really go quite custom made on a lot of your geometry, okay? And we will explore custom and organic geometry a bit more, I think, in next week's workshop for those of you who can make it or watch the recording there. So as I was saying before, a triple click will select all connected geometry there, and I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard there. You've also got an eraser tool in the top right of your large tool set there. So let's now modify our walls. We've grouped our walls and we've grouped our floor. Actually, now's a good time to create a few layers. Layers, same as in Photoshop or InDesign or AutoCAD or other programs, is a way of just visually organizing your file, okay? So layers were under the window menu. and layers on a Mac or Windows default tray, and layers on a PC. So just make sure that's ticked, and then you can collapse or expand that box on your screen. Now, to create new layers, we just click on the plus sign. So I'd like you all to create a couple more layers here. We're going to keep it simple, but we're going to do floor and hit enter. So create these as I go along. Click on the plus sign. We'll do walls. Big projects, you can separate external from internal walls. That's a good idea as well. For this one, we'll keep it simple. And then I'm going to add one for furniture and one for people. And let's add one for a ceiling as well. Why not? We can add to that list anytime. So once you've created a basic layer list like that, added a few layers, put up a green tick, we're going to focus quite a bit on visual output and controlling how our file looks today. That's, and if you catch the earlier workshops, you'll get some other fundamental skills as well. We didn't really cover this stuff in the previous weeks so much. Visual output, when people first start using SketchUp, sometimes they think it's a bit limited, looks a bit plastic, looks a bit boxy. We're going to dispel those myths today. You can do a lot with the standard tools in SketchUp, and you have a lot of control over how you make your file look, which obviously for anyone who's doing a visual and creative field, that is important. So next we're going to modify our walls here. We'll put in, say, a door and a window. Now the way I set out doors and windows is mainly to use my tape measure tool. So if you click on the tape measure tool, it takes a bit of getting used to the tape measure tool. You can measure things with it, or you can offset parallel edges like guidelines, okay? If you accidentally click on the midpoint, that's just going to give you, an end point. It's going to give you a reference point rather than a guideline. But if you hover somewhere over the straight edge, you can click and release, move in the direction you want, and just type in a dimension. I'm going to do 900 here, and then enter. Now, two options for building a door. So offset a guideline there and put up a green tick once you've done that. You can choose your distances, that's okay. I could do guidelines for the whole door. Let's make it like a 920 door. I could offset another guideline, and then I could offset another one, 2100 for the door head, and then just trace that over. Or, even with the first guideline, now that I've got that point for the start of the door, I can just use the rectangle tool to create what I want there. So remembering that if we're going to cut this door into the walls, the group, so we need to double click on our group first. You'll see that now it's activated. The other things are slightly faded in the background. I can just use the rectangle tool here on that intersection between the guideline and the wall. I'm going to click and start drawing, and then look down the bottom right of my screen. I can see there which is going to need to be the width and the height, because I'm already making the box roughly that size. So I'm going to do 920, comma, 2100 for the door. So make a door shape, the rectangle there, and then put up a green tick once you've done that. And it does take a bit of time, a bit of practice to cut holes through walls neatly. There's a few things which can potentially go awry in that process. The first step was to offset the guideline. Then we double-clicked on our wall group. We activated that group, and we chose our rectangle tool, started that junction, drew a rectangle. And then just let me know how you're going with that as well. Excellent, good work, everyone. Right, next step, our main modeling tool, of course, is our push-pull tool. So if we click on the push-pull tool, I always think about where I'm going to start this. I don't start it up in the top corner there. I'll run out of push-pull space on the right angle to push this through. So I'm going to start towards the left side here. That'll make sense as I do this. So I'm sort of dragging back into that wall. Now, I know my walls are 200, so I could push-pull and type in 200 and then hit enter. Or I can just push-pull until I find that back face there. Sometimes it takes a while to register that face. You have to hit it exactly. If you go too far, it'll build some funny geometry. If you don't go far enough, it won't cut through. So have a go at push-pulling your door through the wall there. You'll know if you've divided that wall into two different regions, because you'll see that grid of blue dots that show that it can be selected. Sometimes if you draw a shape onto another shape, if you didn't double click on your group, it won't work, that type of thing. So push pull to that offset limit of 200. Sometimes you get to jiggle your mouse around until it tells you it's on that face. Click again, and once you've successfully cut an opening there, put up a green tick. There are a few challenges to that. Sometimes it just doesn't want to register that back face. So you've got to jiggle your mouse around, make it find that back face. And for anyone watching the recording as well, these are really good skills to practice, and you can also add more detail here. Good work, team. Green ticks popping up. Let's do a window quickly. Same method. Tape measure, hover over an edge there, just click and release and move to the side. Type in any distance that you want to offset a guideline. And then a good thing now to do, I might just set up another guideline for the height, just up to the top of the door head there. Window head height and door head height are often the same on a building, not always, depends on the effect that you want. I just wanted a vertical height point somewhere there, either at sill height or head height, because we're not starting this one from the ground, so we needed some additional height reference point there. So from any height reference point, you could start from the bottom and do a 1200 sill or something like that as well. Use the rectangle tool, draw a window size to whatever size you want, type in some dimensions. So all you're doing is creating another rectangle there. You can always check whether that has split your wall into those two selectable regions. That's crucial, because it's very easy to accidentally build another surface on top of something that's grouped, or have the geometry not quite work properly. And then again, just push pull tool, same method as before. We're pushing that face back into the wall. I'm going to have to jiggle it around. There it is. It's found that back face. If it just misses that back face, it just creates some funny geometry. So you can see there that we've got a door and window. So once you've created a window, put up a green tick and give yourself a pat on the back. Now's a good time to save your work as well. Very good to always save your work. Give it a meaningful name, save it somewhere that you'll remember later. You can call it workshop exercise or something similar. And really it's a good habit to get into. Doing lessons and workshops, I forget to save as regularly as I should. To save after every one or two 3D commands that you do. Now we've got guidelines everywhere here, a couple of different ways to delete those. Some of them were created inside that group, so I'd need to activate the group and use the eraser there if I want to delete them that way. Or under your edit menu, you can just choose delete guides and it'll get rid of all your guidelines. That's for the whole file though, so if you want to keep some of your guidelines, you can always put them onto a layer, create a layer for guidelines, and you can just hide them if you want to keep them as grid references or something later. Now we're getting some semblance of a room or a proper space here. So next thing we want to do, we can't really see into our room, so we're going to use the section plane tool. That's all the way down the bottom right of your large tool set. You'll recognize that lovely symbol there. It's the same symbol that we use for our section and elevation markers when we're doing technical drawings in the course. You'll recognize that, I am sure. So click on the section plane tool. You can then hover over a various type of face. If I wanted to do a vertical section, I hover over a horizontal face, but I'd like you to hover over the front wall there. Like all tools in SketchUp, if you tap the arrow keys on your keyboard, it will change the orientation of the tool. So click on the front face and you'll see a section plane pop up there, and then we can move that plane backwards. I normally move it just in past the wall, so then we can see inside our room there. So do that, create a section, click on that front face, drag it back a little bit so that you can see inside the room. Put up a green tick once you've finished to create a section. The visibility of sections we control through our view menu in SketchUp. It's always worth having a look in the view menu and seeing what's ticked or unticked. Okay, so when we're working with sections, we've got section planes and the actual cut itself. Section fill, if I unhide that, see how that some styles will choose to show the section as a fill, which is fine, and you can choose that fill as well. And then some styles won't, so I can leave that filled in or not. And I can also just hide the section cut altogether. Hi Lauren, glad you could make it. We're a fair way into the session. If you want to build some basic shapes and work along, that's fine, or if you just want to watch, let me know. And if you've got any specific questions or functions you would like to request me to look at, type them in. That goes for everyone in the session. Any specific skills you want me to cover, let me know and we can accommodate that. Now I can also hide the section plane as well, which is the frame there. Okay. Once you've created the section, you can double click on it to toggle it on or off as well, but we don't often want to see the actual section plane itself. We know that it's there, but we can just go to view menu and we can hide that section plane, which I recommend doing for now. All right, so well done to everyone who's created a section there. It's a good time to talk about styles, actually. Maybe we can move the human figure back into the room now. It's not a bad time to do that. I might actually use even my starting point for this move operation on that face of the floor, just so that I know I'm starting at the same level vertically as where I'm going to end. So my starting point was on that face. The finishing point is on that face as well. It's very easy to accidentally put something up off the ground in SketchUp. Okay, save your work. Now, when we look at styles, let's look at changing the style slightly on the screen here and see how we can make our model display differently. So, styles will be one of your tray or dialog box items there on the right that we added before under Window, Menu for Mac users, or Window Default Tray for PC users. Just make sure Styles is checked, and this will bring up the Styles window here, where there's a range of different styles. Look, there's some pretty funky ones. We'll try a couple. I like to have one actually with a green colour for the earth and a blue for the sky. It kind of gives you some orientation within 3D space. So landscape, architectural style, or simple style, they're under the default styles heading under the pull-down menu. There's lots of others. If you go to, actually the Style Builder competition winners are often interesting because there's some really cool sketchy styles in there. You can get a bit more artistic. You can see that the section frame was just turned back on then because that will be a setting within that particular style. That's a pretty cool one with grid paper and sketch lines. You can really come up with some good effects here. A bit of advice, don't click between them too quickly. You're giving your computer's graphic card and RAM a bit of work to do as it goes between the two. But you can see there that there's some interesting styles. I'm going to go back to default styles for now and just choose one of the standard ones. You can modify your styles in SketchUp. This is when you're getting to the output stage and you want to save some good visuals of your model. It's very good to edit your styles and make sure they look exactly how you want them to look. I might expand that window even further. Sometimes the windows in this for scenes and sections are pretty tall windows, so to see everything you want to scroll, you want to expand them a little bit. So within styles, you can edit them. You can edit the background settings. You can change the sky and the earth color. You can change your face settings. The main one that I play around with is edge settings. So I'd like you to have a go at this if you're working along. So whatever style you're using, click on Edit. With the edges, if profiles are ticked, it'll sort of do a line hierarchy like we do when we draw. It'll have some thicker back edges. So if I untick profiles, it'll make a couple of the edges, some of those back edges, thinner. Now they thicken up again. Now they go a bit thinner again. Okay. Now, what I tend to do with my edges You can colour them by material. When you start adding materials, that can have a good effect. It'll take on some similar characteristics to the material itself. But what I tend to do, I find this works pretty well in SketchUp, is keep them all the same, but click on the colour there and just drag that slider up into the grey just a little bit. Dark grey edges are a bit less conspicuous than black. And then click OK rather than cancel. You'll see that that's just sort of softened the edges a bit. As we populate our model and do more work, that just changing your edges to dark grey can make a big difference. I tend to turn the profiles off, even though line weight and hierarchy is often very useful. I find that the harsh black edges look a little bit plastic sometimes, which can be a criticism of SketchUp. Sometimes people say, oh, you can't make it look realistic, but you absolutely can, using styles and using really good materials and things like that. So speaking of materials, it's probably a good time to apply some. So we modified our styles, and just let me know for anyone, how did you guys go? Did you manage to modify some of your style settings there? Really modifying styles and not being scared to have a play around with that is one of the key things in SketchUp to getting a really good visual output going. Now you can also, there's depth Q there, and that will again do a bit of a line hierarchy thing. Once you've got a bunch of furniture items in there and things, it makes the lines towards the background thinner. So you get more atmospheric depth through doing that. You can, I always leave extension off. You can show back edges. It'll sort of show them as hidden detail there if you're doing joinery or something like that. But modifying your styles is a very effective way to control your output and just make your models look that little bit better. Definitely important when you come to the rendering stage of a project. As our materials, so we're going to add a couple of materials. We might even add a ceiling in a minute, and then we're going to look at saving some scenes in our model. So if you click on the paint bucket tool, that will automatically bring up the materials window. You can see that I've been using some tiles here, so let's stick with that theme. Now, to apply materials to grouped surfaces, it's a really good idea to double click on that group first. Okay, so I'm going to work on the floor here at the moment, and I'm going to put in, the timbers in SketchUp are not amazing. It's better to import your own. We'll look at that in another session. So I'm going to put a tile surface on this floor. Why not? When you click on the paint bucket tool, the materials window will open, and it might default to whichever one of the menu items it wants to, but I'm choosing tiles for this one, so maybe I'll find a decent looking tile here. Well, let's go decorative, why not? Alright, so I've added a tile finish to the floor there. So have a go at doing that. Place the material onto your floor surface and then put up a green tick once you've done that. Now I've only added that to one surface there, okay? Now that's a fairly dominating floor finish there, isn't it? Maybe I'll even split that. So this is where layers come in handy. So what I would do in this case, if I want to see my whole floor, and you can work along with this or not, I might just hide my walls temporarily because I want to actually access. Oh, we haven't actually moved those items to the layers yet. Right, let's do that now. We created our layers before. We haven't placed these objects on there yet. So first I'm going to click on my floor. In fact, let's turn the section off for this. You can see that my floor group there has a blue border. It is selected. So anything will have a blue frame around it once it is selected. So once you've selected something, the best way to place it on a layer is to right click on it, go to Entity Info. You'll see all the information about that object. And then you'll see down the bottom right of my screen, I'm in the Entity window, box down, I'm placing that onto the floor layer. So you've got to select the object first. So have a go at doing that. Select an object. Next I'm going to do my wall. So you just click on the group. Entity Info might still be open. If not, just right click, choose Entity Info. Then I can place that one onto the walls layer. So once something's selected, You change the layer in Entity Info. You can do it at the top there as well, but I find people find that more, sometimes it doesn't work when you're new to the software, not sure why. So Entity Info is a great way to check all the info about a particular item. And I can put the human figure, just select her onto the people layer. So now we've got 3 different active layers at least, and now I want to just hide my walls. We were using the section to see in before. So for those of you working along, just put up a green tick if you manage to. The way to double check that is to click on any item that you've just put onto a layer and see if that's what pops up in your layers pull down list by selecting it. So if I click on the human figure, Stacy here, she's now selected. I can see that people is the layer up the top there. So for those of you who are working along with it, Zena and Leanne, maybe a few others are doing that, have a go at that. Understanding layers, and look, it takes a bit of practice, is really a key way to organize your information. The concept of layers comes from artists, architects, designers, etc., working on drawing boards and overlaying various sets of information using tracing paper. So it's literally just a visibility type tool. Grouping things first, then putting them on layers is very important. So now I've got better access to my floor. So what I want to do there, those tiles I'm finding are maybe a bit much for that whole floor surface. So I've double clicked on my floor here. I will give myself a guideline here to work with actually. Maybe I'll do 3300 there. I'm just giving myself a reference point. Let's split that floor in half. Just using a line, one half of the floor, the other half of the floor. Now, when you've selected any surface, you can change the size and shape of that texture. So I had to double click on the group first. I've split this floor in half, and by right clicking on the face that I want to change and go to position with my textures, I can anchor that maybe in that corner there if that's the point that I want as my starting point for the texture. And I've got control over the size and the orientation of that texture. Okay, so I've made those tiles smaller. Now, using my paint bucket, I'm just going to change the, undo that. I need to double click on my group first and change this side here to a different texture. Okay, so you can split your faces in half as long as the object is selected. And then I can actually put that, it's a basic tile texture, but it'll look alright on the edge of the slab there as well. This one, so you've got more control. Don't really need that guideline anymore. It's part of the group. Go into that group and delete it. So I just selected it and used delete on my keyboard there. So you really do have a lot of control over materials. You can offset guidelines as well and scale your materials to exact guidelines. So if you know your tile 300 by 300, offset some guidelines at 300 and then use that position function to scale them up and down as I just did there, but you can align them to guidelines visually. So you can control floorboard width, tile size, everything like that. It's really, really a useful thing. You do have a lot of control when it comes to materials. Okay, now that I've done that, I can turn my walls, the visibility of my walls back on using layers. Alright, and you can practice with those, the materials function as well. You'll see the difference if I apply a material to a whole group. I go to bricks, cladding and siding, very American terms, siding. If I click on the whole group, that applies the color or material to every face. Now, I don't usually want to do that. They're not very modifiable once you've done that as well. So, as I said, I would double click on my object and just change the faces as I need to. Okay, so I can gradually do that. There's more clicks involved, but it gives you a lot more control and better editing capabilities later. All right, now, a couple more things. Let's save a couple of scenes for our model before we finish up. So we've looked at grouping, layers, materials, guidelines so far, and styles as well. Styles are a really big one for controlling your visual output. The next best tool for visual output is scenes. So just to organise my trays here so I can see what I want. The scenes window is often really tall, so you need to give it plenty of space. You might not see those settings down in the bottom half of that unless you expand the box quite a bit. So whenever you've got a view on your screen that you like, you save that as a scene. So a couple of things we're going to do here. I'm going to go to my camera menu here and tick parallel projection. So anyone working on, just do that as well. Change from perspective, like that, where we will see foreshortening in the distance, to parallel projection. Very handy to know that you can do that. Now it looks a bit more boxy, doesn't it? Using this function, we can then create all sorts of different views. Okay, so first up, I might create a front elevation. Just going to pan across a little bit here. So if I want to create an elevation, and if you don't want to see your axes as well, you can just hide them temporarily under the view menu. I'm going to create a couple of scenes here. So with your scene dialog box open, create a couple of scenes. We're going to add a scene for front elevation here. Whatever view you're looking at, you can save it as a scene. Oops. And under the name, you might have to click right down there in the name section to activate that. Yeah, just remember to expand your scenes window. It's a pretty tall one. You might not be able to see everything there. So I've typed in front elevation and hit enter. Now you'll see, hiding behind my large tool set, the top of your screen, top left if you're on a PC, or top middle if you're on a Mac, you'll see a name for that scene. So put up a green tick if you've managed to create a scene. I'm going to create a couple here, and then we'll look at why they are very useful things in our model. Okay, so for anyone working along, have a go at creating a scene there. So you click on the plus sign, name the scene. You'll have to come down and click in there. Or you can, once you've created it, I think you can right click on it and rename it. Things like that. You can also update, add scene, delete scene, all that kind of thing. Then I'm going to create an isometric here. So for anyone who wants to create a true isometric, you have to be in parallel projection first under your camera menu. Okay, it takes the perspective away. We can always put that back at any stage. So you've got to have parallel projection ticked, and then click on the ISO button on your standard views toolbar. So have a go at doing that for anyone working along. Parallel projection, then click on the isometric button, and you'll get a true isometric on your screen there. You can zoom in or out. Don't orbit, because that'll mess with the angles. If I do that, that's not an isometric anymore. I'd have to click on the button again. I'll just center that to where I want it. Yeah, this is really how we control, and I'll show you, this is how you can animate. You can do fly-throughs with scenes. You don't want to save 100 scenes, but saving a few is very good. You don't want to always be zooming and orbiting to find your way back to something that looked good before. Once you like the settings on the screen, save it as a scene. You can always tick and untick any of the variables here, visible layers, active section planes, etc., down the bottom in the window there. So what I'd like you to do, if you can see an isometric on the screen, click on Add Scene. So Scenes is under Window Menu and Scenes for Mac, or Window Default Tray, and Scenes on a PC. So we've created a second scene there. I'm going to rename it to Isometric. If you're creating multiple isometrics, either number them or say left or front or back or whatever, give it a meaningful name. Very important to always name your scenes and your layers, name them in a meaningful way. Often you'll work in team environments where someone else needs to jump in and modify your work. Or even for your own sanity, having just scenes 1 to 20 is confusing, even though there's a thumbnail view of them. So how did you go with that, Zena and Leanne and anyone else working along? Did you manage to create and save a scene there? We're going to create one last scene, a perspective. So let me know as we're going along, if there's, or is there any problems you're having, anything else answered. I'm going to create one more. Stop trying to change the side walls to white. They're all bricks. Oh, okay. Just either undo that, or you probably applied that to the whole block. So whenever I do that, I would just undo it. But you may have moved on. For that, the scenes was on. Yeah, that shouldn't matter. It's more just materials. If you want to change the material, the best thing to do, just double click on your group, click on your material on your paint bucket, and actually just put a new material on there. Okay, so you can choose from colors and just find a color that you want, whether that's white, black, green, pink, whatever it is, and you can actually just apply a new material. If I wanted to get rid of those bricks on the side there, I can just, that's okay, just put a new material doing that. So just literally change the material using your paint bucket tool. You always have control over each face with your materials. Perfect, well done. Yeah, like everything you do, it's not permanent in a computer model. You can always modify it later. So let's create a perspective, an interior perspective here. So two things I want to do to achieve this. First, I'm just going to create a basic ceiling. Now I'll create that essentially like a little, just a flat thing on the whole model for now. Maybe if I was doing an interior ceiling, I might do this slightly differently, but I'm just drawing a rectangle over the top of my whole walls there. The walls are grouped, so it won't stick to that. I'll give it some thickness. I'll just give it 10 mil because essentially I'm making it like a sheet of plasterboard. If you know the thickness of your sheeting, you can do it at 12 mil or whatever it is. I'm just making a ceiling here as opposed to a roof. We might do both on a project. So essentially I've put a lid on my box there. Now the next thing I want to do, I don't want to see that all the time. So I'll need to go to Entity Info by right clicking and put that on a layer. We created a ceiling layer before. So now that's on the ceiling layer. So I can hide and show that anytime I like. So actually for my isometric scene, I might need to then hide that layer, go back into scenes, then update. You can make any changes you like, so section cuts. Choose the scene that you want, and I can right click on that and go update scene. Because I created new geometry, it added that to the scene. Right, now I'm going to, we're nearly out of time, so I'll do this quickly. But just so you know how much control you've got, I'm going back to camera menu, go to perspective. I'm going to need my section turned on here, so under view menu, I'm going to reactivate my section cut. I'm going to make a nice front sort of perspective of this room. I want the ceiling on. When you're doing perspectives, it's really always worth building a roof or a ceiling, so then you sort of see into the space. You get a more realistic view inside. I don't like to see sky and ground when I'm doing a perspective, so maybe I'll just do part of this room, but I'll zoom right in. You can even under your camera menu, you can change your perspective. Don't mess with it too much. Under field of view, 35 degrees, like a camera lens, is the default. You can type in a different amount, or you can zoom in or out, and it exaggerates the perspective, kind of like a sneaky real estate agent trying to make a tiny little bathroom look like an indoor swimming pool. So you can change your perspective there. I actually recommend typing in numbers, so I'll type in 40 into, rather than just using the magnifying glass. So now I've got a perspective here, okay? So now I can save that. If by going back into scenes. I know I'm working quickly here just to get this point in before we finish off. I can add another scene, but actually let's do one more thing to really show you the difference in how scenes can display here. I'm going to choose a different style for this scene as well. I'm going to go to Sketchy Edges, and I'll make this one more of a sketch like that. That one will do for now. It's a crayon one, looks a bit like a pencil line, it's not too bad. So, I've made all these changes here. I've changed the perspective, I've changed the angle, and I've changed the style. So now, but I can save that pencil perspective, which is what I'll call it for this one, a perspective sketch. As a scene. Okay, so that's saved. Now, to change between any of my scenes, all I've got to do is click back on my isometric there, back on my front elevation, back on my perspective sketch, and you'll see that they sort of fly in as well. You can do whole animations using swapping between scenes. You can animate that loop, and there's some very, very good effects you can get there. So look, that's taken us all the way to the top of the hour. I know I did speed up a little bit at the end there, so don't worry if you didn't keep up. But that's to show you today. Today's main focus was on visual output. So just a quick recap on the skills we covered. We used our rectangle tool, our offset tool. We grouped things together like the floor and the walls. We made some cutouts in the walls. We used our guidelines using the tape measure tool to do that. Then we created layers that allows us to hide and show things. Then we started looking at our different views, top, front, isometric, things like that. Camera menu, parallel projection, and perspective. This is really giving you all the visual output control that you want. We modified our styles again as well. So, Belinda, I think you're in one of my classes, aren't you? I'm sharing these with my classes in the forums, and I think I'll double check with our team where they're being shared more broadly with all students across the courses. But I've got a thread in each of my classes in the discussion forums where I'm sharing any SketchUp resources, including recordings. So I think, and just remind me, Belinda, which one of my classes you're in, because I know you're in one of them, but I've got so many students in classes that I sometimes forget. So they do take a while to convert, so normally it takes me a day or two to get them up there, but you can always give me a reminder. After the recording pops up, I will convert that to an MP4, and then I'll share it on the forum. So interior built environment. There's already a couple of recordings up there for you to see already. Okay, so scenes and styles are a big, big part of today's lesson, as were layers, and it really allows you full control over your visual output in SketchUp. Have a great week, everyone. We'll wrap it up here. If you can join for next week's workshop, again, love to see you there. Use the SketchUp website, their YouTube channel, and ninja.com to practice in the meantime, and I will see you all for the next installment. Thanks for joining.